Good afternoon, and welcome to the 2024 State of Downtown. We're delighted to be back in the Seattle Convention Center's Summit Building, a facility that continues to welcome thousands of people to downtown, helping drive our revitalization. In fact, over the past 12 months, with the Summit Edition, the Seattle Convention Center has welcomed nearly 400,000 attendees, bringing visitors to our restaurants, shops, hotels, arts and culture and science venues. This place has played a significant role in fostering that sense of connection and community critical to downtown success. Before we continue, the Downtown Seattle Association acknowledges that we gather today on the homelands of the Coast Salish people, the first peoples of Seattle who have continued to steward the lands and waters since time immemorial. We make this acknowledgement recognizing the unique role we play in stewarding downtown's public areas and pursuing our vision of a downtown for all people. The DSA commits to meaningfully engaging, including and honoring Coast Salish people and pursuing actions to amplify their rich history, culture, and contributions. Now, last year we gathered in this space to talk about the optimism and opportunity for our downtown in 2023. And I think it's safe to say that we have made significant progress over the last 12 months. Investment in downtown is strong, and we continue to benefit from creative public-private partnerships, including a very big and exciting one that you'll learn more about today. And speaking of partnerships, you've probably noticed a little bit of a change at City Hall the last few months. And because of that, the spirit of partnership is stronger than it's been in quite some time. And a large part of that is because of City Council President Sarah Nelson, who will join us shortly with an update on the new council and her priorities for downtown's future revitalization. Yeah, that's worth clapping for. Last, in keeping with our theme, today's event is designed to help you connect with other members of the DSA community, our corporate and nonprofit members, downtown residents, and civic and elected leaders. In a moment, DSA President and CEO John Scholes will take the stage with the State of Downtown address. John will detail downtown Seattle's progress, challenges, and choices we have to make. For this year's keynotes, we are thrilled to get insight on a few big efforts impacting downtown and elevating Seattle. The redevelopment of our central waterfront is the most transformative civic project we have seen in decades. Yeah, that's worth clapping for. And the Seattle Aquarium's new Ocean Pavilion project will open later this year. That and the recently announced Elliott Bay Connections project will create a waterfront experience that will be the envy of cities across North America, if not the world. And in a moment, you'll hear from Joy Shigaki and Leslie Koch. Our program will wrap up with Como 4's Chris Daniels leading a conversation with three people driving progress on critical issues facing downtown. That discussion will feature City Attorney Ann Davidson, Seattle Police Chief Adrian Diaz, and Care Department Acting Chief Amy Smith. Now, I would like to recognize our generous event sponsors. First, thank you for our presenting sponsor, Lane Powell, and in a bit, you'll hear from Lane Powell President Barbara Duffy. The Vanguard sponsor is Alaska Airlines. Our convener sponsor, bringing you today's happy hour reception, is MoPop and Cruise Lines International Association. Go MoPop. Everybody's happy about happy hour. Our innovator sponsor is Mortensen, and today's live music sponsor is PNC Bank, and you'll be able to enjoy the band at our post-event reception. Appreciation to our visionary sponsors, Amazon, Clark Construction, Downtown Van Hudson Pacific Properties, Lease Crutcher Lewis, Ani Group, Schwabe Williamson and Wyatt, the Seattle Children's Research Institute, Uber, Urban Renaissance Group. An appreciation also goes out to all 13 of this year's steward sponsors for your contribution in helping us bring you this year's State of Downtown. And also thanks to our media sponsor, the Puget Sound Business Journal. Now please help me thank all our sponsors and partners and our 43 corporate seating hosts. Thank you all. Finally, let's give a special welcome to the elected or appointed leaders who are here today, and I ask they stand to be recognized and remain standing while I call their names, and let's hold our applause until all are announced. First, starting with the man who helped make the summit a reality, King County Executive Dow Constantine, King County Assessor John Arthur Wilson, King County Prosecuting Attorney Lisa Mannion, King County Council Member Claudia Balducci, Port of Seattle Commissioners Ryan Calkins, Sam Cho, Hamdi Mohammed, Seattle City Attorney Ann Davidson, Seattle City Council members Sarah Nelson, President, Joy Hollingsworth, Kathy Moore, Rob Saka, Dan Strauss, Tanya Wu. My gosh, I think we have to notice this is a public meeting today. And also Squamish Tribal Chairman Leonard Forsman. Thank you all for being with us today. Yeah, thank you. And before we move on, I have one more housekeeping item. We encourage you to join and amplify today's conversation and post about this event on social media using the hashtag SOD2024. SOD2024. We hope you enjoy today's discussion about the state of your downtown. Thank you.
Please welcome Seattle City Council President Sarah Nelson.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you, Sung, for that introduction. And thank you to the sponsors. And just thank you all for being here and your interest downtown. I just love this building, so let's take a moment to recognize the beauty. Hi, I'm Sarah Nelson, City Council President and Chair of the Governance, Accountability, and Economic Development Committee. And I just have to say that I agree that this is a transformative moment in downtown because we've now got a supermajority pro-public safety, pro-economic growth city council, and yay. And the very fact that we've got 6 council members in the room today, I believe, is an indicator that things are changing. And we've come a long way since 2 years ago when I talked to this event and I said, my job is to give a damn about downtown. Well, now I've got company and it's really exciting. And I recognized, however, that actions speak louder than words, right? We've got still a long way to go to get to where we need to be. And that's because, in part, we've seen I would say a complete breakdown in the correlation between city spending and progress on the events that matter most to the people in this room and all over the city. Crime, addiction, homelessness, housing affordability. And so it's no wonder that public trust in council is at an all-time low. Just have to recognize that. And we know, council knows, that to build back your trust, we've got to deliver results. Thankfully, we don't have to reinvent the wheel because last year, John presented a roadmap of steps that we should be taking to work toward economic recovery in downtown. And I won't touch on all of them, just 2 that I'm trying to make a little bit of progress on. So the first is obviously return to work, return to office. And even if we never get back to the levels before the pandemic, that doesn't mean we don't keep trying, and we have to build those numbers up. But I'm not going to tell you, this room, what to do because it's up to your elected leaders to lead by example, right? I think so. And we know, to quote our mutual friend, that public service requires being in public and conducting it in public. And so I'm really happy to say there's good news. Every council member has returned to City Hall. They're working there every day, fully staffed, and it's made all the difference. The vibe, yeah. The vibe is totally different. I mean, we can be more productive. People are getting to know each other, and it's just a lot more fun. And the next time you watch a meeting in chambers, we're all sitting up there at the dais, which is quite a change from last year if anybody was in that meeting to renew the mid, right? And so that's happening, and I'm working on updating the city return to work policy, and that'll be coming out soon. So that's good, and yep, there we go. When I said council meeting in chambers, what must have gotten into your thought bubble was what happened last week, and I'll just cut to the chase and say, no, we're not gonna let people disrupt our council meetings. We're gonna stop that disruptive behavior. That's what we do. We have to do the people's business. And so, you know, that shouldn't have been any controversial thing, right? That's just what we do, keep the ball rolling. So clearly, people aren't gonna come back to work, or the retail core, or the theater district unless they feel safe on our streets and on public transit. And so public safety is the next item. There's a reason why I made the District 7 representative, Bob Kettle, chair of public safety, because he has to listen to you. He has to listen to his constituents, and he's got more skin in the game to drive the change that we need to see. So that was on purpose, and it's clear that nothing's really gonna change fast enough until we can bring back SPD staffing levels. That's the most important thing of all, not just for downtown, but the whole city. And we don't just throw up our hands because every other city is having problems with the labor pool, et cetera. No, we have to ask why, and then dig into our internal processes to figure out what's working and what isn't. And also for council to develop some legislative fixes if necessary. And that's the role of council, to act as an oversight body. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm identifying barriers, and you'll be seeing something come forward pretty soon. That's just a little bit of a tease. So that's one of those things that I'm working on, and I just have to say that it all comes down, of course, to accountability. That's what we do as a legislative branch. That's why there's a formal place in my committee by putting that name in there. And it takes both the executive and council to work together. We've got a better relationship with the mayor's office than we ever have before. And so this is extremely exciting. And all I have to say is that we could just go down the list of everything that's going wrong, but you're gonna hear so many positive things that are happening downtown in 2025 and 2026. Well, let's just give a plug for 2024 being the year of downtown. I'll just state that right here and say that for that, I need your help. This is my last point. It's a call to action. You've got allies on city council. You can't write us off as a lost cause anymore. We need you. We need your voice. We need you to make comments, send emails, urge council and the mayor's office to be bold, because that's what it's gonna take to get us where we need to go. And I'm just so much looking forward to a stronger partnership with the people in this room as we look forward to our shining future. And just thank you for being here. Thank you, DSA, for bringing us together. That's it. Thank you.
Please welcome DSA President and CEO John Scholes.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Councilmember Nelson, for being here, for your remarks, for your convicted leadership. I've had the great pleasure for over 20 years of calling Sarah a friend and a colleague, and I'm glad that we all today can call her the President of the Seattle City Council. It's got a great ring to it. And thanks for modeling the way of being back in the office. I think democracy and public service should be done in public again, and I think it's good for government, it's good for downtown, certainly. And it's good for the relationship between our elected leaders and our mayor. We were down at City Hall meeting with some of the new council members over the last week, and it was really nice to have those meetings in person and not behind a laptop. So thank you to you and your colleagues for modeling the way there. Somehow we scheduled this on the same night of the State of the Union. Awkward. I wish President Biden's people had called my people. We would have sorted it out. But we're glad to be here and sorry to be competing with our president. And it's good to be back in this incredible building. This ballroom, this building is such a gem, and it's still got that new convention center smell. It's good to be back for the second year in a row. This weekend over at the Arch Building, the Seattle Golf Show will be taking place. 4,000 or so attendees in the Arch Building. And then here, 6,000 folks for the Student Affairs Administrators in Higher Education. That's a mouthful. The golf show sounds more fun. I'll be at the golf show, but I'm glad the other 6,000 will be here. And last weekend, we had 75,000 people over the course of 3 days come through this building for Comic-Con. And I was talking to Jeff Blosser, the head of the convention center earlier, about their experience here. It was phenomenal, they said, and they look forward to being back. So it's great to have this building functioning at such a high level, as well as our Arch facility. A couple of just acknowledgments before I begin here. I wanted to give a special welcome to David Downey, who is the president and CEO of the International Downtown Association, which is our umbrella group of folks who do what we do around North America, around the world. And David and his colleagues and 1,200 or so folks will be coming to Seattle in September of this year for the annual International Downtown Association Conference. We are delighted to be hosting this conference in partnership with David's team this year and comparing notes with our colleagues from around the world around the revitalization of our downtown. So thank you for making the trip out from DC, David, and being with us today. And I mentioned Jeff Blosser earlier. I wanted to acknowledge Jeff's extensive service in the convention industry. 45 years of service in convention center business across our country. 13 here in Seattle, getting this facility built through a pandemic. 22 years in Portland, an incredible asset for Seattle, who will be retiring from his role, well-earned retirement in May. So thank you, Jeff, for all you've done for Seattle, for shepherding this project through a really difficult time. And Mary Baccarella, the wonderful executive director and leader of the Pike Place Market, who steered that incredible 100-plus-year-old institution through a very, very difficult time. 6 years leading the market. Mary will be retiring later this spring. She's had her hand on the helm of some of the Seattle's great institutions, from SIF and the Space Needle. She's made great contributions to our culture here in the city and been a great leader for the Pike Place Market. She's here today. I want to recognize her service and wish her well in her next adventure. Those are two resilient leaders, and they embody, I think, Seattle's best values. And I've been thinking a lot about resiliency recently, and the resilient individuals that we have in our city today and in our past, and just the resiliency of our city structures, the city itself, the urban form, how we come together, the resiliency of that our cities have demonstrated for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And I got to London last year with my son, and I was thinking a lot about London's, and we had a great time. That's what a 14-year-old looks like. Great time. He's such a cool dude. He's 14 going on 34, and we had a blast. And I wanted to watch our final day there. I'm like, let's just go watch the final round of the Open and F1 at the bar. And he played the role of the dad. He's like, we can do that, but not until we go see Buckingham Palace and the British Museum. I said, fine. In any event, we were in London. I reflected on that city's history, 2,000 years of history. They've been bombed. They've faced riots, plagues, multiple pandemics, terrorist attacks, and that city stands today proud and thriving more than ever. The parks were alive. The retail was phenomenal. The bars were alive. The museum was packed. We had a fabulous time. And while Seattle does not have the same extensive history of London, we've faced our series of challenges as well, and we've demonstrated a significant amount of adversity over our 150 years, a significant amount of resiliency as we faced adversity over our 150-plus years. And we all saw those predictions coming out of the pandemic of the demise of our cities, of gathering in downtowns and urban places. And we saw new phrases, the urban doom loop, come up. And even the author of that phrase has sort of walked it back. That's not what we've seen. We've seen progress in people returning to our cities, returning to our downtowns and urban areas, wanting to be connected with one another, wanting to share in experiences that they can't get anywhere else. And I think we've all seen that progress here in our downtown over the last 2 years. No doubt we have a lot of work to do, but we're making significant progress. And I just want to say it's always a great privilege to be able to deliver these remarks on behalf of our organization and our board and our membership to you. I think this is my 9th or 10th opportunity to do that, and it's something I take a lot of privilege and joy in as well. So I want to talk to you today about just a couple of what I see as our strengths and assets as we continue to rebuild and revitalize in our downtown, and 2 challenges that I think we need to see more urgent action on and more attention and focus. Number 1, we're revitalizing from a very strong base with a great mix of uses in our downtown. This has never been a downtown where you just go to work. It's never been just a commercial area of our city. We've had this great mix that's been intentionally created over decades. That's been our recipe and our playbook, to locate our arts and culture and performance venues within the downtown core. Our sports stadiums and arenas tucked close in to the core and near one another. Our convention center, the existing building, the Arch, and the new convention center, to have those close into the downtown. This was probably the most complicated place in the state of Washington, on top of a transit facility, the bus tunnel that was here, to build a convention center. But we made the decision to do that because it's good for this mix. And I echo Sung's shout out to County Executive Dow Constantine. Anybody involved with the convention center will tell you this building would not be here but for Dow's leadership in getting this thing done as the owner of the underlying dirt that this building sits on today. So thank you for that, Dow. So we've got this, yes. So we've got this great mix of the aquarium is here, the symphony, arts and culture, and yes, commerce as well. And it's a neighborhood. We've been intentional over many decades of locating thousands of residents and residential units in our downtown. And we've seen continued growth over the last 20 years in the number of people living in downtown Seattle. Today, there's more people that live in downtown Seattle than did prior to the pandemic. A record number of people living in downtown Seattle. 106,000 folks calling downtown home, and 74% growth since 2010. So a remarkable story, and very intentional about creating this mix of residential arts, culture, sports, and commerce in our downtown. And we've got more coming, more than 6,000 units of residential development under construction, currently just trailing the city of Denver among our peer downtowns west of Chicago. And within the last year, 2,500 residential units opened. So we've got this great mix, which is really the recipe for any downtown that wants to be successful and relevant post-pandemic. We need to move from a central business district to a central experience district. That's what this place is about. It's about connecting people, it's about community, it's about social experiences, experiences you can't get anywhere else, and it's about having that great mix of uses and this flywheel that feeds economic activity, walkability, proximity. That's what the market wants, and we've been focused on that for a number of decades. I think it's one of our assets as we continue to make our way out of this pandemic. And I will say this mix that we have is only going to get sweeter when the Sonics return to the city of Seattle. The city's ready, we've got an arena that's ready, Seattle Center is ready, and we have a locker room that is ready for an NBA team. There's a lot of chatter lately about the return of the Sonics. The mayor mentioned it in his State of the City speech a couple weeks ago. There's this buzz about town, about the Sonics' potential return. Downtown cannabis store owner Sean Kemp said whatever he can do to sweeten the pot for the NBA to return a team to Seattle, he will do it. He said Climate Pledge Arena is a phenomenal place. He's very high on Climate Pledge Arena. There's not a better joint in the country for an NBA team to play. So we look forward to the Sonics' return to our city. We deserve it. Moving right along. Number 2, we are investing in our downtown. We continue to make investments, the public sector, the private sector, the philanthropic sector. Even in these uncertain times, we are investing in this place. It's a critical strength of ours, and it's something worth being very, very proud of. The new aquarium that will open later this year, Coleman Dock and the improvements to the ferry terminal to make sure 8+ million pedestrians can get through there, plus cars as well. We're expanding light rail, Linwood Light Rail. Linwood Link will open later this fall. All trains lead to and from downtown Seattle. So huge investments in public infrastructure and big investments in programs and promotion and cleaning as well. We renewed and reauthorized the Metropolitan Improvement District for another 10-year term last May under the leadership of Councilmember Sarah Nelson. That was a huge lift, which will mean more than $200 million of investment over the next decade in cleaning, marketing, beautification, park programming, and staffing. That is a huge win. Just in the last 2 months, we've hired 35 additional ambassadors, a team of 165 full-time ambassadors out there. Lots of new equipment as well. And we're promoting our city as well under the leadership of Visit Seattle and the investments our hotel community are making, which were increased this last year, $10+ million a year in promoting downtown and Seattle to the world, to the country, to leisure travelers, and to folks looking to host conventions here. So on total, we've got $5 billion or so under construction or recently delivered of public infrastructure and $400 million plus in ongoing spending over the next decade to keep this place clean, beautiful, and to promote it to folks from around the country and around the world. That's a big deal. So even in these uncertain times, we're doubling down on our investment in this place. That's a strength and asset of ours and something that gives me a lot of encouragement. And of course, the waterfront. And I won't say anything more than that because you're going to hear from Joy and Leslie soon, but this is going to blow people's hair back when this thing is done, and we're not far from it being done. But looking ahead, one other additional investment to highlight. The Seattle Kraken and the folks that brought us Climate Pledge Arena and the One Roof Foundation under the leadership of Mari Harita, the vice chair of the DSA, and her colleague Rob Johnson, who I think are here with us today, they proposed a $100+ million remake of Memorial Stadium, and boy, does it deserve it. That dilapidated stadium that serves so many kids in our community and has served all kinds of other purposes over its history deserves additional investment. And with a partnership with the city and the school district and some incredible pros in delivering phenomenal stadiums and arenas, we are going to have a terrific facility that is going to continue to serve kids in our community, Seattle Public School kids, but be available for all kinds of other uses as well. It's going to be another injection of great positive energy on the Seattle Center campus. So thank you to them for what they're doing there. This is a big deal and a big investment to come. So the third area that I see as a strength that gives me encouragement is really around our brand. Our brand remains strong. Seattle's brand remains strong around the country and around the world. And our brand got beat up pretty good during COVID, and for some good reasons, some well-earned reasons in local press and national press and beyond. But I think what we've seen with the strong return of visitors that have come from around the world to have experiences here either for the first time or to have them again is that our brand remains strong. We had a record cruise season in the summer of 2022 and in the summer of 2023. Thank you to our friends at the Port of Seattle and some of our other cruise friends in the house today for all they do to drive economic activity into our downtown. There's a lot of my colleagues from around the country that would love a cruise business as part of their downtown, but they don't have any water. And we benefit from the water and all those people that get off the boats and spend money in this downtown. They drive a heck of a lot of economic activity. And later this summer, those boats are going to be plugged into shore power. So we're making big environmental strides as well and to support our cruise business. So people from those that are on cruises to come in for weekends with your family, whether it's from Issaquah or Iowa, folks coming for conventions, people return to Seattle. And that's a good thing. And I think some of us were worried of, as we reopened coming out of the pandemic, after we saw a lot of negative headlines, and not just us, but folks from around the country, whether it was on the Today Show or other places, would they come back? They have, and they've come back in big numbers. And, Taylor Swift, who was at the Taylor Swift show? One of them, yeah. I mean, she rocked Lumen Field, right? And Ed Sheeran, he rocked a barista shift at Starbucks before he rocked 2 shows, one I think at the Paramount and another at Lumen. These big events, the concerts at Lumen, the concerts at Climate Pledge, they are big business for our downtown. The Saturday night of Taylor Swift's show, we saw the most hotel revenue ever captured and generated within the city of Seattle. By leaps and bounds, she blew that record out of the water. $7+ million generated in a single Saturday night when she was in town. The Blue Jays were here too, and Capitol Hill Block Party. My colleague Tammy Canavan, the CEO of Visit Seattle, will remind us there was a lot of things going on that night, but she was the top bill. So in total, in the summer of 2023, we had more than 6.5 million visitors come to downtown Seattle, and that's about where we were in 2019. So we've seen a really strong recovery over these last few summers as we've worked our way out of the pandemic. And conventions have been strong as well. Here, I got ahead of Tom here on this graph, but you can see 6.5 million or so. And I want to mention conventions. Last year was a really strong year for conventions in downtown Seattle. And this year is going to be even stronger. 55 conventions booked in downtown Seattle. That compares to about 44 booked in 2019. So a real strong return of conventions back to our city. And hotel room nights sold already this year to support conventions, Visit Seattle tells us, is 114% of what it was in 2019. So that's a lot of economic activity coming through downtown over these next several months of 2024. And just another shout out to Visit Seattle. We've got one of the best destination marketing organizations in the country and a tremendous leader in Tammy Canavan with a terrific team that is selling Seattle every day around the world. And foot traffic to some of our major attractions in the summer of 2023 outpaced in and around our major attractions. You can see them here, outpaced foot traffic in 2019. So a lot of progress in the return of visitors, and I think a big signal that we've got still a really strong brand in our city, both around the country and around the world. And if you thought we had a lot of visitors last summer, buckle up for 2026. When World Cup descends on Seattle. And our friends from Seattle World Cup are here, April Putney and some of her colleagues, and thank you to them for all they're doing. I understand Peter Tomazawa, the CEO, is with FIFA and the other 14 or so cities down in Miami for a meeting, but they are hard at work to make this a phenomenal experience. It's the biggest event on the planet. It's going to be the biggest party our town has seen since the World Fair, and it's a great marker 2 or so years out for all of us to rally around and toward. It is going to be a treat. And I should say, too, the Seattle Sports Commission and Beth Knox, their CEO, all that they're doing to support, and you know, we had to bid on this and win, so there was a lot of work going back many years to just get this thing, and now the work, the additional work that it takes to actually host it. A huge shout out to Beth for the incredible success we've had bringing and hosting All-Star Week, the Winter Classic, and now we turn our sights on this major event. There's a few in between. March Madness Women's Regionals will be here as well, but thank you to Beth and her team at the Seattle Sports Commission for all they do. So our brand clearly remains strong. We're investing. The public sector, the philanthropic sector, the private sector continues to invest in this downtown. And we've got this, dynamic mix of uses. We're not overly subscribed to one sector or another. We've got arts and culture and residence, commerce and sports and conventions in our downtown. These are all positives and things a lot of downtowns would really die for. These are two challenges I believe warrant additional action and more attention and more focus. First, locals are coming less often to the retail core of downtown. So when you isolate out Seattle Center and the great arena, which drives a lot of traffic, and the stadiums on the south, and we're just looking here at the retail core, think First to 9th Avenue, so this building to the Pike Place Market, and Stewart to roughly Union. Locals that folks live within 10 miles of downtown are coming half as often post-pandemic as they were pre-pandemic. You can see those visitation frequencies there. And when we compare ourselves to some of the other entertainment, retail, and food and beverage centers within our region were trailing their recovery. They're about back to where they were when it comes to frequency of annual visits of locals to those places pre-pandemic to post-pandemic. So we've seen this market shift in who is coming in to our downtown. We've seen more visitors from out of state, which is great. We want them to come here, spend money, and then they go, which is not a bad deal. But for our downtown to be successful, for downtowns to be relevant, they've always had to be places that locals love first. Locals love them first, then everybody else is going to love them too. And we've got work to do here to reintroduce locals, folks living within 10 miles of our downtown, to the 50-yard line, to First and Main, to the core of downtown, which is such an important part of our city, where many of our cultural institutions like the Symphony and the Fifth Avenue are located, the Pike Place Market, and others. And we have a lot of assets in that part of town as well, and we have a lot going for us. You know, the Pike Place Market and the Nordstrom flagship are two of the most incredible retail anchors that any downtown could ask for across the country, right? We've got both of those in our downtown. But we've got work to do here. And I think coming out of this pandemic, urban trips to urban areas, downtowns, are very much less obligatory. They're less out of obligation than they were pre-pandemic. They're much more discretionary. And, you know, 3-4 years ago, people had to be in the office 5 days a week because they had a job and their employer told them to be. Well, that's not happening right now. Those were obligatory trips. We have a lot more discretionary trips today. So people have choices, where they go to shop, to eat, to dine, where do they go to enjoy arts and culture. They have good reason to choose downtown Seattle, and we've got to give them more good reason, and we've got to continue to raise our game to get locals back. And I think the opening of the waterfront project is going to be this big invitation for folks that may have not been downtown since the pandemic, or may have not been downtown that often since the pandemic. We have an opportunity to leverage the opening of that incredible asset to re-engage and re-invite locals back to our downtown. And a must-do to attract more locals to our downtown is to ensure it is safe, clean, healthy, and welcoming for all. If cities do not get that right, if they haven't gotten that right, they've never been successful. And while we've made progress on reducing violent crime in our downtown, and in 2023 we actually had fewer violent crime incidents than at any one point since 2018. So we've actually seen in the downtown area a reduction in violent crime. So that's a good thing. And while we've made progress there, misery and suffering in our downtown are up. This is Kimberly, one of our ambassadors, who performs CPR and Narcan way more than I think anybody of us would like. Along with her colleagues, Kimberly, in total with our ambassadors, have performed about 300 administrations of Narcan over the last year plus or so. The misery and suffering driven by the fentanyl crisis is way up on the streets of downtown, across the city of Seattle, across King County, and across the state of Washington. We have a moral crisis, a health crisis, and potentially an economic crisis if we don't wrap our arms around this worsening emergency. And let's look at some of the numbers. Washington State, between 2022 and 2023, along with Oregon, led the nation in the total percent increase in fatal overdoses among all 50 states. And in King County, deaths from drugs have more than doubled since 2020, continuing to go up at an alarming rate. And among peer metro areas, we are outpacing their growth in fatal overdoses over the last year. And increasingly, an overwhelming majority of deaths from overdoses and drugs within King County are centered in Seattle. Nearly 60% of all deaths from drugs within our county last year occurred within Seattle. The population of Seattle is about 30% of the overall county. And increasingly as well, the impact of drugs is impacting the most vulnerable in our community. About 25% of all deaths from drugs within King County last year were folks that were living unsheltered or living in emergency shelter. More than 300 folks living most vulnerable in our community dying from drugs outside. And this is a huge drain on our public emergency management system. And I think our panel that follows will talk a bit more about this. But you can see in downtown, just downtown, the significant increase in 911 calls driven by overdoses over the last year. So I don't think we can expect locals to return if they have to wade through a public health crisis that fosters urban disorder and takes a lot of lives. And let me be clear, this is a moral crisis, it's a health crisis, there's too many people suffering, but it also has the potential to be an economic crisis. And I don't think the previous challenge I highlight of locals not returning in the same numbers they did previous to the pandemic, even though they've returned to similar frequencies of visits to the other entertainment centers in our region, and this crisis are unrelated. And as I said last year, I think we can have a thriving, vibrant, safe, and healthy downtown with more arts and culture and small businesses and restaurants and retailers that are back open in the core of downtown just a few blocks from me, or we can have a fentanyl marketplace that produces a lot of suffering. We're not going to be able to have both. And I think we're at a moment to make a really difficult decision about clear actions that we need to make to foster more safety, health in our community. What shouldn't be a difficult decision, excuse me. And it's time to make that. And the rate of growth on these charts is scary and it's immoral. And we need to come together as a community and do more. So, and I do want to acknowledge what the county announced earlier this week, the 5 steps that County Executive Constantine, along with some council members, announced, along with public health. I think these are critical initial steps. We have to act with urgency. This is everybody's crisis. Philanthropic sector, private sector, all levels of government need to come together to make a difference here. So we no doubt have some tough challenges to confront that require collective and urgent action. And we have some advantages and strengths as well, as I covered earlier. And I do think, I agree with Councilmember Nelson, I think we are at this unique moment, an inflection point of sorts in Seattle. I was having lunch the other day at the Nordstrom Grill, and I was reflecting on the passing of Blake Nordstrom, which was just a little over 5 years ago, this past January, and I was reflecting on what he would always say in a boardroom. Blake was the chair of the Downtown Seattle Association many years ago, among his many civic contributions in Seattle. And I remember him in a committee meeting or a board meeting, and any kind of meeting, he would always be sort of challenging whether or not we had consensus and alignment. Consensus and alignment. If we didn't, we were never going to achieve any progress. We'd never reach the outcome. If we didn't agree on the scope and sort of contours of the problem and how we were going to address it, we'd never get there. Consensus and alignment, consensus and alignment. He would just sort of pound his fist on that. And I think at this moment we sit in Seattle, when you look at the council we have, you look at the mayor and his focus, you look at what voters just said in November, you look at where the philanthropic sector is investing, you look at what the business community and the private sector are doing, Seattle does not get closer to consensus and alignment than we are right now. And we ought to not waste it. We should be bold and act with urgency to address the crises that I just covered and to seize the opportunities we have in this room, in this city, excuse me. And if you think about the actions of the generations that came before us as they worked their way out of those periods of adversity, whether it was the Great Fire or the Boeing bust or the retail core threatened in the mid-1990s when it was all boarded up and Frederick and Nelson left, I think we should draw inspiration from how bold they acted, the conviction they led with, the shit they got done that we still all benefit from today in downtown Seattle. And we should take that same attitude, that same conviction, and apply it to the problems and the opportunities we face today. That's our charge at this moment, to maximize the consensus and alignment we have in this room, in this downtown, and in this city. Let's get it done. It's worth it. Thank you very much.
Please welcome Lane Powell President Barbara Duffy.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's surely my pleasure to join all of you on behalf of my law firm, Lane Powell, which is proud to once again serve as presenting sponsor of DSA's State of Downtown. Lane Powell has been longtime sponsors of this event and longtime residents of downtown. In fact, next year we look forward to celebrating our 150th anniversary as a firm. That's our Lane Powell mosh pit down there. We're as excited as ever at the possibilities that lie ahead for Seattle's future. Connections and community, the themes of today's event, are two essential qualities of many strong organizations and of a vital and thriving downtown. While we've spent the last few years integrating virtual connection into our everyday lives, nothing can replace that shared experience where people come together in person, shoulder to shoulder, eye to eye. The heart of our city offers so much: offices, parks, restaurants, shops, and community spaces. These are the places where we can come together and build strong, lasting connections, where we mix with friends old and new, forge bonds, build trust, making memories, shoulder to shoulder, eye to eye. These are the places that make our downtown so vital and lasting. Lane Powell has a deep and lasting connection to downtown Seattle. Our firm arrived in this city in 1889, and we've had a front row seat to the events that have shaped Seattle's history. In fact, the year Lane Powell opened its doors in Seattle was the same year that an overturned glue pot in a carpentry shop produced the Great Seattle Fire along the city's waterfront. That fire decimated 25 city blocks and the entire business district. But in its aftermath, this community rallied in a remarkable way and came back stronger still. Within a year, more than 460 buildings had been built, and most of the reconstruction of the central business district was complete. Our waterfront was reborn. Seattle showed its resilience and vision then, and has continued to do so time and time again in the many years since. That forward-thinking vision is the basis of the revitalization that we will be discussing today. A commitment to making bold moves and meaningful investments in spaces that will elevate this beautiful city. When the waterfront park and Elliott Bay connections are complete, Seattle will enjoy 50 acres of gorgeous parks and public space connecting along 3.5 miles of waterfront in the very heart of our city. These will be amazing new public spaces for residents, visitors, and tourists to enjoy, especially bringing those locals back down to rediscover and connect with our city, something, as John mentioned, is just vital to our success. And in just a couple of years, that space will be ready for the world to see and enjoy when we welcome a truly global audience to our downtown for the 2026 World Cup. Our two keynote speakers today will highlight the truly transformative moments that lie ahead for our downtown. These are big, substantial moves for our community, and the impacts will be felt for generations to come.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank John, the DSA board and staff for this invitation to be with you today. I'd like to also acknowledge our elected officials, DSA members and sponsors, many of our colleagues with the City of Seattle, friends, board and staff who are here, community organizations, civic leaders, residents, and downtown champions and advocates. Thank you for your belief and investment in this city. The theme of community and connection couldn't be more appropriate for Waterfront Park. What you saw in that segue video was pretty powerful, starting with the beginning of this place, which is Coast Salish land, and those who are still thriving in this place, but also the audacity of a city like Seattle and what it's taken for us to grow into ourselves and also be resilient through also what was a difficult time of pandemic. Waterfront Park is a project that is more than 15 years in the making, and I think that that's a reminder of how big, audacious projects can happen with the talent of people in a city like Seattle. We're known for our innovation, our passion, our creativity, and our audacity. And this is one of the largest campaigns for a civic space in our city, and I think we should be very proud of that. It'll be a catalyst for reimagination, for revitalization of downtown, and the 15 million people who are anticipated to come to enjoy the beauty of our waterfront, but also discover the rest of downtown and our neighborhoods. The LA Bay Connections project will continue this experience for an additional 16 acres, and Leslie's going to talk a little bit about that. But Waterfront Park is opening in a year, and I came back only a year and a half ago, so many of you were dealing with the construction for 10, 12 years. But it's absolutely thrilling that it's in our sight line, and it's a year from opening. So I'm a kid that grew up in Seattle. I grew up in parks, which have a lot of special meaning and memory for me. I ran the trails at Discovery Park, got my first nettles. I climbed this very unfriendly child structure, if you were there in the 70s and 80s, and ate my mom's rice balls and chicken as we played a mean game of wiffle ball. I had family events, birthday parties, community events at Seward Park, and walked that loop time and time again, both with friends, but also needing time just to reconnect and find respite being in nature. I was a kid at Rainier Playfield. We ran around in summer nights as my dad played softball, and we saw ourselves in that community, being able to play safely and seeing kids that look like us. And later, as a Franklin High School tennis player, go Quakers. Any Quakers in the house? All right, thank you. Worked on my serve, but also found a sense of place and safety in the South End as a public high school kid. And so when you think about your favorite park in the city or the place that you grew up in, what do you smell and taste and hear? And who are you with? Is it someone that you love? Are you there for a special family memory or event or a cultural event? And are you finding respite in nature just to disconnect? Because even as humans, we really need to be in nature. And are you feeling a sense of belonging, a sense of joy, a sense of connection to place? And how is it a reflection of that city, whether it be Seattle or the place that you live? This is Pier 62 at Waterfront Park that opened in the throes of COVID in the fall of 2020. No ribbon cuttings, no fanfare, lots of masks. But we have been programming this park, thanks to the work of the city of Seattle, who has built this extraordinary place, to be able to bring communities together, to connect, to create belonging, and to create memories. This was last year's REI S'mores on the Shore, and we expected 200 people, and we had 900 people on the wettest day. This Sunday, we're actually having our final fire pit, and REI is also hosting, so please come down. Last year, we hosted our Lunar New Year event. There's a trend. We thought maybe 400 people would come, but it was the day after the massacre in Southern California, and over 2,500 people came to be in community, to be connected, even when times are difficult, and to find a sense of place in this incredible space. And this is Soul in the Water, sponsored by Africatown, really bringing the best of the Black community's culture, art, and community and connection back to the Central District. Over 1 million people have come to Pier 62, and it has been a reminder of how parks can be transformative, that they're made for, and they make for dynamic, democratic cities. And nationally, we're seeing this trend of reclaiming old infrastructure projects, highways, double-decker highways, railroads, to be able to reclaim the beauty of our cities from what they once were. And Waterfront Park is going to be part of that renewal. It is going to be part of the revitalization and part of creating a place that everyone sees themselves in and memories to be created. Sorry, I'm having technical issues here. All right. So the reminder, this is a place that's on Coast Salish land. The stories, the voices, the histories are centered in this place of Indigenous people and will continue to be centered in the work of Friends and how we keep evolving this place for our city and our region. So a reminder, like the Segway video, this extraordinary double-decker highway cut across the most beautiful part of our city, like the Embarcadero in San Francisco, like other cities across the nation. It was not about human-centered design. It was about disconnection. But the audacity of the vision after the 2001 Nisqually earthquake, but conversations even before that was, what happens when you build a new tunnel We actually have a final walk and party on the viaduct. I heard there were like 100,000 people for that. And tear it down to reveal what is possible about a new waterfront and a new park to be born. It is a 20-acre park that is in the shadow of the former viaduct. So I've met people who actually moved after the viaduct came down and said, "What's the big deal?" It's like, "Oh, you don't remember." So part of the storytelling of this place is retelling that story, right? What it took to get here, to take that double-decker highway down, the political leadership, residents, advocates. This 20-acre park running from the Stadium District all the way to Belltown will be creating this dynamic tapestry of experience of public space, connection to the waterfront, the tendrils back down to Pioneer Square, the 20-block Pike Pine extension to Capitol Hill, and down back to Pike Place Market is part of that vision of reclaiming this extraordinary space. There's massive economic impact on this project as well, and so that is an important aspect of this. The Office of the Waterfront and Civic Projects, our colleagues who are here, Angie Brady, who's the current director, and her team are building this extraordinary park with the talent of contractors and amazing construction workers. Over $1.1 billion in construction overall, 6,200 jobs, and then there's a reality of ongoing economic impact to bring locals, regional visitors, national and international visitors for spend of experiences, of hotels, and then the quality of life for the 100,000 people who live downtown, for the people who are in these areas and many low-income communities who are also around in this area, and to create a vibrant downtown that we know it. So a little bit about Friends of Waterfront Park. We are a nonprofit that was established in 2013. So when you think about these big urban infrastructure projects and big parks, the new model nationally is needing the leadership of a nonprofit to provide fundraising, organizational management for programming and activation, stewardship and park operations, and in our case with our partners with Seattle Center, which I'm going to talk a little bit about. And it's not just as of for now, it's for generations to come. So we care for this place in extraordinary ways. So if you think about groups like Friends of the High Line in New York or Friends of the Underline in Miami, we are becoming that trusted nonprofit to be working in partnership. And that work is done through partnership fundamentally, through public-private partnership. And it's leveraging the best strengths and assets, as John talked about, with people across our cities, nonprofits, businesses, residents, community-based organizations. That's the core of our work, and that's the invitation to all of you. Our first decade of Friends is really modeled our transformative placemaking, the innovation and piloting centered in equity, because you can build a place and expect them to come, and that was a movie. But that model is flawed, because you have to be intentional to ask why people do not feel that sense of safety and inclusion and belonging in public space. And so Friends has been driving programming and operations and community engagement from the early design back in 2012, and bringing over 400 community groups together and meetings together to be able to share information and test this programming. We've been doing public safety, campaign for Waterfront Park. We've been a convener and really centering in DE&IA and what it means to build equity. And what that means is that we listen. You really ask the question of who is not included and how do we go deeper to make people feel that sense of connection. By co-designing programs, by co-curating programs, our team is doing incredible work alongside extraordinary community organizations in Seattle and keeping that experience local. We do that also through our community committees, advising us, helping us make sure that we're staying true and accountable to the work, because this is going to make it a park for all. And this is just a sampling of our program impact the last 3 years. 176,000 people have come in for our free public programs. Over 1 million people have come to Pier 62. And on and on. Our cultural master plan will be launching in the next couple months, asking the question of how does this become this extraordinary new civic space for our city? We've been doing programming with community, skating like a girl, and hosting Salmon Homecoming, which is true to who we are. And this moment, too, is actually really exceptional. This is not only a moment of transition for the viaduct, but for Friends. And we have moved forward with an exclusive sneak peek into our rebrand, which is a reminder of the iconic piers that we are sitting on and the park that we're creating together. Hopefully it's fresh and it's welcoming, and we will become your favorite neighbor, an organization that you're going to want to be part of, so more to come. But a little bit of the progress on the waterfront, and do my best to honor our colleagues with the Office of the Waterfront and Civic Projects and the contractors who are working on this. This is Railroad Way on the southern end of the park that's butted up against the Stadium District, and how it's looking now on Railroad Way, an open area for gathering, for moving folks who are visiting and going to games at the Stadium District or going to concerts and make their way back to the waterfront. The Pioneer Square enhancements that will create this extraordinary pedestrian, friendly experience connecting you from the waterfront into Pioneer Square, and a recent groundbreaking. Pioneer Square Habitat Beach that had a soft opening in time for All-Star Game and open to the public for people to be able to touch the water for many, many years. It's been many years, and be able to enjoy the views of the Salish Sea and a quiet moment alone. Our 1 mile park promenade that runs from Pioneer Square all the way north to Pier 62, that'll create this extraordinary connection along Waterfront Park. And actually, on the right-hand side, there are actually swings that have just been installed to give everyone an experience to connect to the beauty of this place, but also to make safe passage all along the promenade. Benches have gone in, and thousands of plants, trees, and other bushes are also going in to make this a lush, beautiful park. Pier 58, formerly Waterfront Park, is currently under construction and will open by the end of 24, early 25. We'll have a beautiful lawn and tree grove, places to gather and activate and to gather. The Pike Pine Screenscape, which will open this fall, makes for great safe passage all along Pike and Pine for 20 blocks from Pike Place Market all the way to Capitol Hill and down to the waterfront. And Ocean Pavilion, our colleagues, Bob Davidson and his team, preparing to open the extraordinary Ocean Pavilion, which is embedded in Waterfront Park and the Overlook Walk, and will be a world-class aquarium reflecting on conservation internationally and generating new generations of conservation leaders. And the Overlook Walk, the real sweet spot, I kind of call it the selfie spot. It's going to give you the experience of a 360-degree views, the same height of the viaduct, for those of you who are really missing those views driving north on the viaduct. People talk about that a lot. And extraordinary places to sit and to reflect, and the beauty of the landscaping. You see the boulders that have recently gone in, the Salish Steps, and the views that you'll be able to take in. We are wrapping up the campaign for Waterfront Park, which is a $170 million effort, and we've raised 88% of that goal, which is extraordinary. And we're in the last stretch to get there, so it's a real invitation to all of you to join us to close this chapter of this campaign and move into how Waterfront Park is going to be part of this town and this ecosystem. We're making public safety investments. We've invested $3 million to date on Pier 62 alone, modeling a new model for public safety that's centered in a humane approach, as John talked about. We're working with Project Reach to provide outreach workers for those who are unhoused. Our staff are the eyes and ears on the park, and a new partnership with Seattle Center is providing public safety officers to be able to be available to address issues, to be able to enforce park rules, and then you call the Seattle Police Department when it's needed. But that unique approach is what we need to solve for some of these more challenging issues. As part of that partnership, we invested $5 million that was matched by the Metropolitan Park District, because public-private partnership is critical for solving for challenging issues. And that's important for making sure that this park is a park you all feel safe when you come, and everyone feels that sense of welcome. Our partnership with Seattle Center, I'd like to call out our colleagues that are here, started on July 1st, and we are grateful for the wisdom and the expertise that exists on that 78-acre campus. They are providing extraordinary urban park space management with Friends, and we're absolutely thrilled that they will be managing maintenance and public safety now into the future. I just want to say for a moment to recognize there are many, many people in this room. I came back, many of you know, only about a year and a half ago, and I recognize that the audacity of projects like this take many, many people. And there are a lot of civic leaders in this room who have fought and solved and try to figure things out from the very beginning, but that's what it takes for these kind of projects. And I just want to take a minute to really just acknowledge many, many people between the Friends Board and staff, many civic leaders in this room, businesses, residents, LID ratepayers that have gotten us here. The city mayors, there have been many in this project, I think there's 7. City council members, city staff, contractors and designers, our governor, washed out in the Port of Seattle. The Office of the Waterfront and Civic Projects, Angie Brady, who's the current director, and Marshall Foster, the former director, who's now with Seattle Center. They just need a lot of cred for that, exactly. The Seattle Parks Department, Seattle Department of Transportation, and then a special shout out to the Seattle Historic Waterfront Association, the Pike Place Market PDA, the Lions for Pioneer Square, and the DSA for supporting the LID. Thank you. We do audacious things in Seattle. We are going to make memories at Waterfront Park, and the grand opening will be happening in less than a year in early '25, so stay tuned. It'll be followed by seasons of activation and programming that'll be led by friends in our community. So come to S'mores on the Shore, call to action if you're around this Sunday. Take a walk on the waterfront and see how much is changing and see this park taking shape. Reach out to us about grand opening sponsorship, about co-promotional opportunities, and give to the campaign for Waterfront Park. And we just want to invite you to be friends and remember this city is extraordinary and we appreciate all that you do in this room. Thank you.
Please welcome Elliott Bay Connections Advisor Leslie Koch.
Hello, everyone. Hi, it's really a great privilege to be here. A number of you know I'm a former Seattleite, and I've been living on the other side of the country, and I'm really here to talk a little bit about Elliott Bay Connections, and my job is to work for the extraordinary donors, Melinda French Gates, Mackenzie Scott, the Diller von Furstenberg Foundation, as well as Expedia, who have really enabled the project that I'm going to describe. As Joy talked about, this is all about partnership, and there'll be a little bit of overlap, I think, in some of the things we'll talk about, because that's really what's happened in the transformation of public space around the country. Those images you just saw are actually all of parks that were created in the last 2 decades. This has been an amazing period in every city, and I had to carefully choose. I did choose a project, an island I know well in New York, called Governor's Island. But I wanted to talk, oops, sorry. Oops, hold on 1 second. How do I go back? Can you guys go back? Hello? Thank you, sorry. Thank you, sorry. And I wanted to draw your attention to 2 parks that I know well. In my job as an advisor on public-private partnerships, I've had the great privilege to be in many of those cities. And these 2 parks really embody, I think, what Seattle is about to experience with the opening of Waterfront Park. Brooklyn Bridge Park and Ralph Wilson Park, which is part of the Detroit Riverfront, obviously very different cities, Brooklyn and Detroit. But those parks have brought everyone from their cities, from every neighborhood to the waterfront to really create a whole different kind of experience. And I think you heard in Joy's remarks what's already happening on Pier 62 and what the vision is, as Barbara referred to, in imagining this entire waterfront truly connected. As I mentioned, creating those parks is not just about brilliant architects, it's not just about generous philanthropists, it's about public-private partnership. And public-private partnership is really the result of innovative leaders, elected officials like Mayor Harrell, elected officials like the commissioners of the port, 3 of whom are here, who really lead their teams to come up with innovation and new ways to approach partnership. So I'd like to take a moment just to acknowledge the staff who are here. From the city of Seattle, Deputy Mayor Burgess, Deputy Mayor Wong are here. I know that Adiam Emery is actually back working, but if we can just take a moment to recognize them, the heads of SDOT, Parks, the Office of the Waterfront, the Seattle Center, very importantly, SDCI. And then from the port, in addition to the commissioners who've been recognized, Executive Director Steve Metrick and his extraordinary staff. What I'm about to talk to you about is truly the result of partnership with those public servants. And if we can just take a moment to acknowledge the people who work every day in the public sector. And it is a great privilege to work with them. And of course, on the private side, we wouldn't be here without the DSA. Not only John and Sung's extraordinary leadership, but many members of the board are actually directly involved in the project. And as John alluded to earlier, the extraordinary staff from the DSA that have brought us here. So I would like to thank them as well. And of course, there are many other partners. Leonard Forsman is here from the Suquamish. We're working with the Suquamish and the Muckleshoot tribes. BNSF is an incredibly important partner. As you'll see in a moment, King County Executive Dow Constantine has already been recognized. And of course, the amazing team of local designers, planners, project managers, and construction managers who are all based here in Seattle, many of whom are members of the DSA, who are together working with our public partners to realize the vision that I'm about to share with you. So a moment to thank everyone. So the idea of connections, what Barbara referred to, what Joy referred to, of connecting that waterfront, it actually goes back to another era of public-private partnership. There were a group of civic leaders, I do confess they were all men, is my understanding, so a little different, who came together in 1903 and really with the vision of how could Seattle be a beautiful city. That was a full-page ad in the Seattle Times. And they hired the Olmsted brothers. And as we all know, we can pick a park, Seward Park, Woodland Park. What would Seattle be without the Olmsted design parks? And the Olmsteds really recognized what makes Seattle unique and gorgeous. And I think it's worth reading that this, again, from 1903, 120 years ago, the primary aim should be to secure and preserve for the use of the people as much as possible of these advantages of water and mountain views. And today is a gorgeous day for me to question my sanity in leaving Seattle, but that you live in a very, very special place. What people don't recognize, perhaps, is that the Olmsted brothers also had a vision for a waterfront park on the other side, not the lake, on Elliott Bay, that was never realized. So when we think about the inspiration and vision for reclaiming the waterfront for all of us, it actually goes back that long. And then as we looked ahead, but from 1903, there were many generations of civic activists in this community who advocated for the removal of the viaduct and taking the waterfront back for the people. Lake to Bay was important, the idea of connecting that waterfront to the Seattle Center. And this image is actually by James Corner, the visionary landscape architect who's designing Waterfront Park. And this is from one of his first presentations when he was first hired more than a dozen years ago. And again, recognizing this idea of connection and parks that it can extend along the bay. And so when you look a little bit more closely at the central waterfront in the heart of this city, there's this gorgeous park under construction, which Joy just shared with you, the Seattle Aquarium, the beautiful Olympic sculpture park brought to us by the Seattle Art Museum, many of people who are here, one of the, I think, the greatest urban sculpture park in America. But as you look at this, you see that there are some broken connections. The stretch of waterfront of Alaskan Way that goes between Pier 62 as well as Olympic Sculpture Park. And then, of course, these two amazing public parks that I'll talk about in a second that are just north of the Olympic Sculpture Park. So in coming together and thinking about the goals for connections, why are we all using that word? It's really the idea of realizing that vision, first articulated by the Olmsted brothers, of connecting people, connecting the parks with this new greenway, connecting the people of Seattle to Myrtle Edwards and Centennial Parks, thinking of them as a connected set of parks, not parks that just serve bike commuters. We know many of you in this room ride your bikes to those parks. Connecting people to the Salish Sea and the stories and the people who have been here since time immemorial. And then finally, connecting all of us, right? One of the great things about the parks that you saw in that video is they have transformed the lives of those cities. There are now places that people share and come together from neighborhoods across their cities. And that at a time, we have to acknowledge, of division, that is an extraordinary thing to have done. So quick description, our project is building a greenway from Waterfront Park to the Olympic Sculpture Park, restoring and revitalizing Myrtle Edwards and Centennial Parks. The greenway will create safe green passage, a shared use path, in the place of the Benson trolley tracks that many people remember. We're working very closely with SDOT, who is also bringing the Alaskan Way Safety Project, and adding plants and safe crossing to create a way for all of us on bikes, accessible pedestrians, and families to come. So this is an idea today of what this looks like and what it could be in the future as we move forward. Then thinking about Myrtle Edwards and Centennial Parks, these are two gorgeous urban parks. You couldn't wish for a better site anywhere in the United States, and they are carefully stewarded by our colleagues at the port as well as at SPR. But in a city where there are many resources and many needs, the public sector can't attend to everything. And so we are very privileged to work in partnership with these public agencies to bring a new vision of what these parks can be connected to the rest of the waterfront. So as we work getting input from the public and working with our partners, we're looking at adding much needed park amenities in those parks, enhancing the existing lawns, the plantings, and the trees, adding to the 700 trees that are already in those parks, improving bike paths and pedestrian paths for safety and also for accessibility, and the 2 beach coves that already exist, trying to bring them up to the level of the Olympic Sculpture Park Beach Cove and improving habitat and our access to water. And then finally, adding new play opportunities for children. So again, looking at Centennial Park today and imagining what it can be with new plantings and improved trails, looking at the beauty of Myrtle Edwards Park and a beach cove that provides even improved habitat and better ways for people to access the water and the green. So with that vision, bringing that all together, you can imagine, as Barbara referred to, really a connected waterfront in 2026. So to quote her again, and this is actually a quote from Mayor Harrell, so we know he can't be here, but he is leading this vision: 50 acres of connected green public spaces and parks, extending for 3.5 acres. Peter's not here, but we have committed to, with the city and the port, to delivering these improved public spaces in time for the World Cup. That is specifically, and I think Scott Redmond's in the room, so I'll remind him, that is June 10th is when the World Cup begins in Mexico City. We have an extra 2 days, Scott, which is June 12th is the first game here in Seattle, and the 19th for the American team. And we made that deadline because the philanthropists who are underwriting this project and whose vision it was believe in the city of Seattle, believe in the downtown, and believe in the public-private partnership that can happen with the leadership of the port and the city of Seattle. And it is that vision which can bring people back to the center of the city, as John talked about earlier, and really create a shared space that everyone in the city and region can enjoy. And so it is our privilege to work, again, in partnership to create this connection, and we hope that you will contribute your thoughts. We will have another round of public engagement in April, and we'll work with our partners at the DSA to publicize that, because we want to hear from you, we want to hear from your friends, from your constituents, to make sure that this vision of connected parks and the improvements that we are able to make to these beautiful spaces is what can bring us all together as a city. So thank you for having me.
Please welcome Como Forest Chris Daniels, Seattle City Attorney Ann Davison, Seattle Police Chief Adrian Diaz, and Care Department Acting Chief Amy Smith.
All right, we're running long and we're batting cleanup. No pressure. I want to talk a lot about numbers because you heard John Scholes in his presentation talk a lot about metrics, both positive and negative, in the city of Seattle. So we're going to share the last part of this presentation today, talking seriously about public safety downtown and the fentanyl crisis and the increasing rates that John showed us earlier. And I want to start with you, Chief Diaz, because we are talking about numbers. And I don't think a lot of people heard this number a couple of weeks ago. We heard the mayor say property crime is down in the city of Seattle. You told the Seattle City Council that is not accurate.
Yes, so when you look at property crime, last year it was down about 10%. This year, we're already seeing that same reduction. But when you talk to businesses, businesses have expressed, I've been burglarized, 15 times. I don't call the police anymore. And so when you actually get to the ground, people are struggling. They're being impacted where their windows are being broken. And a lot of that sometimes is contributed to people in mental health that are experiencing. And so they're covering those costs because they feel like if I don't, I'm not going to end up getting anything from the police department as far as just a police report. And I'm going to end up sometimes having to deal with my insurance, which they're going to raise my rates, or sometimes not even have me be insured. And so these are the challenges that we're dealing with. We know that over time that people don't always report property crime, but I think that right now over the last several years, we've actually seen it where it's becoming a lot more prevalent.
And underreported, and the reason why, and I think there's been a connection between this, is the lack of police officers. I know you're going to give a presentation before the Seattle City Council on Tuesday regarding staffing, but if you want to break any news here in front of this crowd, where do you stand with staffing and hiring, since we know you've been short for a long time?
Yeah, so we've lost 725 officers over the last 5 years. You have to look at the department at that time in 2019 was about 1,425 officers. So you could imagine we've lost half the staff. That means that there's no officers that would be patrolling the streets, and your investigations bureau would be completely decimated as well. We've hired a lot of people. We've still down 375 officers. So there's still a huge impact of what we're experiencing. We're working our officers a lot. Last year's overtime, just for the amount of officers or the amount of time, was equivalent of about 100 officers. And so we're making it up through overtime, but we have to be very, very cautious that we don't burn our people out.
There was a debate before the old city council that the bonuses, that money should be used for something else, should be used for drug treatment programs. If those bonuses aren't working, was that old council correct, that this has not been a program that's worked?
Well, for me, I believe that we have to have an equal playing field with all other police departments. If other departments are enhancing with incentives and bonuses, we have to be able to do that stuff, that same stuff for our department. So, that is going to be part of that discussion next Tuesday. But I do think that we have to figure out how we incentivize people to come into this job as well.
I'd like to put some of the data back up on the screen as we talk about the trend lines downtown and the overdose calls. As I talked to you, City Attorney Davison, you were a big proponent of the Blake fix and fixing the drug ordinance here in the city of Seattle, but we have seen the overdose numbers as they continue to go up. How many people have actually been charged or treated as a result of that drug ordinance?
It has only been in effect since October, so we have a few months. I'll check with our chief too. I have about 220 people that have been arrested on that. And I think the piece that I'm really wanting to focus on is that enforcement is really part of what we're talking about. Enforcement really is what we need. When we're talking about what John presented and how we want to have more predictability about the safety of sidewalks and public transit, it's because we need to say that our laws have mattered, and we do have a drug law now, which we did not have, and so now we need to enforce on that, because otherwise, I do think it's not compassionate to hold people accountable. That's when we're hopeful for the people's best self, is showing we care.
There's been some scuttlebutt, City Attorney Davison, about an ordinance on how many times somebody can overdose and refuse treatment. We heard the city council president in front of everybody here tease something is coming. Care to elaborate?
Well, that's her thing to say. I'll say for Council President Nelson. But I really do think that it's not, we shouldn't think that that's something we should shy away from. We should not be reticent to enforce our laws and to put that in there, because that's really where we're saying, again, with our systems, we care enough to actually act. When we don't care, we don't act. And we saw with the numbers, it's do or die. We really do need to do something, because the cost is great to people who are overdosing and is great for our economic impact and positive growth in downtown.
One of the issues that this crowd has been concerned about is graffiti. You have the ability now to do something about that, but there's still a lot of graffiti in this city. How are you going to crack down?
There is a lot. We did not have a lot of enforcement prior to my arrival. We did have an injunction. I'm really proud of my staff, our line attorneys, who got that injunction overturned at the Ninth Circuit. So we do have that available, and that is something that we are actively working on. And so we do know there are crews that are out there doing this, individuals who think it's okay to do, but it is destruction. It does cost a lot, and it does create a lot of visual blight, which in my mind invites a lot more criminal activity.
So a lot of people in this room have seen the two of you, but they have not seen Amy, who is the head of the Community Assisted Response and Engagement Program.
You got it.
CARE. It is a new program. You are the third arm of law enforcement. Have you seen any early improvements downtown from where you sit?
Third arm of public safety, not
That's
of law
another way to say
enforcement. Yeah, no, it's different, yeah. So community safety, I think we're seeing improvements because we're starting to alleviate the burden on other first responders. So I talk to Chief Diaz all the time, I talk to Chief Scoggins all the time, Health 99, and we've got to create capacity in the system. They can't staff up fast enough, and we can't scale fentanyl response fast enough, so it's nice to have a new kind of professional go out to 911 calls.
I heard John Scholes here last year say that the city of Seattle should treat the fentanyl crisis like the COVID response.
Yes.
Oregon and Portland in particular have a state of emergency in effect that was issued by the governor there because of the fentanyl crisis, that you can make the argument, I've been down there, I've seen it firsthand, it's 10 times worse than what we have seen in Seattle and King County. Why isn't the city of Seattle and King County treating the fentanyl crisis like COVID?
I don't know that we're not about to. I mean, I agree with everything I've heard today, that there is strong consensus, there is awareness that this is an emergency, that people are dying at unprecedented rates. It's unacceptable. I wake up every morning and look at that overdose dashboard. I look at the age of folks who are dying, and the medical community is telling us that people might live with this addiction for 2 years. And so I often, I run 911, and I often make I draw the corollary that when somebody calls 911 threatening to jump, I go out and get them. I send lights and sirens, and we get them to give them a chance at life, and we're not doing the same thing right now with fentanyl.
City Attorney Davison, do you agree? Do you agree with what she just said? Do you think that the city should take a different approach here with the fentanyl crisis?
I think it's a substance we've never seen before, and I don't think that we should think that it's individuals are capable of choosing to go away from it. It is so addictive, it is so potent, and it is so deadly. And it is deadly to our young children who are being exposed just because they happen to be in an area around somebody who's using the substance.
Is there anybody on this panel who has talked to your colleagues in Portland about best practices and what they are seeing in the first couple of months of this emergency? Amy?
Yeah, I just did. So Mike Myers is my counterpart. And I know that we talked to the police chief down there, and really what they're doing is treating it like COVID. They have a joint command call every morning at about 8. They're very, very focused on law enforcement partnerships that are targeting the dealers. So they are criminalizing the dealers. That's the focus. And so they go into the hotspots, make an arrest. My understanding is this is with partnership at the federal level. And then the term they use with me is saturate. They saturate the area. The folks who have been victimized by these dealers are brought inside or offered emergency temporary shelter, and they're being incented to accept the shelter. They're being offered actual support, medical support if they need it, so that they can create a pathway into permanent supportive housing.
Chief?
So yes, we're actually having communication with San Francisco as well. As you imagine, because of the Blake decision, it really created a huge infusion of fentanyl into our community. 5 years ago, or 5-6 years ago, we were about 500 pills. We recovered 2 million pills last year with our federal partners. And what pill was about $15 a pill, we're under $1 a pill. And so you think that when you actually talk to people on the street and they're using anywhere from 15 to 20 doses a day, that seems like a habit of about $15 to $20, but they've got to steal for that habit as well. And in order for them to do that, you're stealing $50 to $60, if not $100 for that. So this crisis not only has the overdose impact, but it also has an impact to a lot of our small businesses a lot of our, just overall business environment that affects the downtown core. Because we know that, 3rd and Pine and 3rd and Pike and 12th and Jackson have been areas for trafficking of property. And not only are we dealing with fentanyl, that actually every single time, and it seems like every single time that we're arresting somebody for dealing fentanyl, we're recovering a gun as well. When I was actually working, with the anti-crime team way back in the day, we would find sometimes dealers selling, crack cocaine or heroin, but we weren't recovering a gun every time that situation happened. With fentanyl, we are recovering a lot more firearms. So it's more dangerous, not only for the user, but the actual environment is actually a lot more dangerous as well.
So I just asked the city attorney about the ordinance. You just mentioned particular spots around town. 12th and Jackson is still bad, and those areas on 3rd and 4th are still bad. You're the one who's enforcing the drug ordinance. Do you think it's made any difference?
Yeah, well, I actually would say 12th and Jackson has gotten a lot better. And I was just on an email string with our community who actually also noted that they feel it's improving. They still have a long road ahead, but 3rd and Pine and 3rd and Pike is still a huge challenge. We've actually staffed officers in both areas. I actually have it between 12th and Jackson is really roughly about 8 in the morning to about 8 in the evening, because we have a school that's very short or very close by. At 3rd and Pine and 3rd and Pike, we have another set of officers that come in for about 7 more hours to provide emphasis patrols there. So we're trying to make sure that we're having an impact with that. We're running operations where we actually are targeting not only users but also dealers. And so we do find ourselves, like sometimes you find a little bit of a whack-a-mole, because you go into an area, they make some arrests, they go back to the precincts, and a lot of times that whole group is, another group is back occupying that space. So that's a huge challenge for us as well.
I think it's the first time anybody's talked to you since we heard what the state legislature did earlier in this week on the police pursuit laws. So as we talk about enforcement on these laws, when that police pursuit law goes into effect in 90 days after the session, is that going to change anything for the Seattle Police Department?
We are actually evaluating right now currently our vehicle pursuit policy, as well as our vehicle tactics policies, such as pinning vehicles, especially when people are sometimes passed out, because we are experiencing people that are going through fentanyl overdoses, but they're passed out at the wheel. And so we also have to make a safe environment to make sure they're not driving off. So we're currently doing that right now. We're actually in the midst of training our vehicle tactics policy. But right now, we also, I'm mindful of when you loosen up some of the standards, our biggest payouts for sometimes traffic deaths because of a pursuit death are in this area. And so we really have to we tend to be a lot more restrictive when it comes to our vehicle pursuit policy. I had 9,000 stolen vehicles last year in this city. So we want to make sure that we push it to the edge of where we think is still keeping people safe in the community, but also making sure that we're not making a harm to the community by pursuing everything that's out there.
So now that we've painted a really dark picture, let's talk about something positive. Amy, you are relatively new to this gig.
Yep.
You've been making the rounds.
Yep.
You have seen what has happened over the course of the last few months. Is there reason for optimism for this crowd?
Yeah, I always say I'm the most optimistic because I just got here. I've never been around politics before. I think everyone gets along. I think labor's fun to work with, and city and the county and everything goes well. And honestly, that has been my experience. I've just wrapped up my first year. I'm career nonprofit. I'm used to being on the front lines of service provision, and so that's where I still spend a lot of my day, trying to identify what the gaps in the system are, especially across the medical community, clinical, social work, outreach. And it's really encouraging how much consistency there is. And I think that's what we need here, is some intellectual and ethical consistency in our policy design. The mayor's office has been great to work with. I think people are curious. I'm known for being very candid, and people are curious if I get notes on that. I don't. I've been very supported to answer questions as I see them, as the literature reflects. And I'm having a great experience with this council as well. So I think we're going to see a lot of change and a lot of collaboration and a lot of improvement as we stay anchored in the evidence.
Chief, with those shortages you're talking about, how can people be optimistic about the future of Seattle?
You know, I'm very optimistic in the sense of, you know, our officers are doing a phenomenal work. Just this last weekend, we actually made we made 3 homicide arrests, and you know, obviously you don't want any homicides, but to make 3 homicide arrests in a weekend, that's just the amount of effort that is going into these investigations, the amount of time that our officers and detectives are committed to doing the work. Last year we recovered more guns than we've ever recovered, even with 375 less officers. We made more arrests. I mean, just all of our crime stats are going down. So even if you look at last year, robbery, aggravated assault, you know, rape, and not homicide. Homicide was the only one that was really up, as well as motor vehicle theft. But you're seeing crime stats start to actually tread in the right direction. And we're looking at these trends to make sure that, you know, are they just kind of like a seasonal trend? And they're not, they're holding. And so I think that's a really amazing work to our command staff, that's also trying to make sure we put the officers in the right spot, to the officers that are going out and doing the work every single day. So I think, honestly, this is, and the mayor's office has been extremely supportive. I mean, addressing a lot of, like, having CARE really help us out with crisis calls, massively improvement. When you look at homeless issues, having, you know, the UCT team, all these are supportive of us. So we need these resources to be able to do the job.
City Attorney Davison, we talked a lot about drug addiction, crime. Any reason to be optimistic?
Absolutely. I'm very thankful to have a lot of new people to government, especially on the council. I think new people to government is really a fantastic view that we can all gain from. New eyes on the same problem, of also expecting it in a different delivery of time. It doesn't have to take years upon years to actually see some of the change. I think to be able to let loose and to say, we can come together, we actually have people who now want to problem solve, not be divisive in rhetoric, but actually look at what is the best approach. Do we call everything under one label and then we just get it all bogged down and we don't actually be really distinct in identifying the problem so that then we can find a solution? Now we are starting to identify problems correctly. We have people who want to work together and problem solve, and I think that is absolutely a place to have hope.
So in my business, people are told to know their crowd and know their audience. So we'll end with this. You've got a lot of people in the business community here, a lot of people in construction, a lot of people who would like to see the city change course. I have been down to Los Angeles and I've seen how the private business community created a fund to attract police officers for housing. I have heard you, Chief, talk about zoning changes and how important that is to get foot traffic to increase public safety. And there's going to be a big rezone conversation in this town over the next several months. So I think let's start with Amy. Is there anything in the private community that can be done to reduce the addiction and reduce the criminal problems that we're seeing in the city of Seattle right now?
Yeah, I think the first thing is just to acknowledge the officers. You know, we talk a lot about how to incent officers to be here, but I sit in 911 and I know this is a hard place to be a cop. You know, we need to demonstrate our support of these officers. I observe all the time their expertise in human behavior, their kindness, their compassion. They're working overtime all the time, and it just doesn't really get acknowledged, so I think we can do that. I think my request of this group would be to not politicize these conversations. It's not useful. These are not political questions. We have people who are suffering. We have medical emergency, clinical emergency, and this is not about politics. And so I think we'll be able to get much further down the path of response if we don't debate it so much. I didn't like in the fall when people debated my title for a month. I have no interest in that. You know, people are suffering.
Chief, quickly.
I couldn't agree more with making sure that we recognize the officers. We're working towards getting a contract, and our officers are, you know, charging hard. We're getting, you know, some of the capacity built up for other units. But what's also is that we're really streaming ahead for World Cup 2026, and I think that's really going to showcase this city, and I think we're going to be ready for it. I'm not going to think I know we'll be ready for it.
City Attorney, you get the last word. Anything that the private business community can do to make things better?
I still want you to focus on, we need to have in-custody treatment. If we are going to be making a difference, it has to encompass all aspects of how we deal with this battle. It can't just be one of the tools that we have, it has to be all of them, and that means we have to focus on in-custody treatment, and we have to build out re-entry for somebody at the other side of that. And that includes at the misdemeanor level, because that is really where we are closest to root cause. We need to address it then so we don't invite and have increase in criminal activity in the felony level. We need to do it right the first time. We need to focus at the misdemeanor level, build out that system, the entire process, not just at the front, but throughout the entire system. And it will require all of you to be a part of that, because many of you provide those services, and many of you will employ those people because they can make a recovery, they can come back to society, and it starts by showing that we care, by enforcing our laws, and we bring people in through, and get them back at the end.
Thank you. Seattle City Attorney Ann Davison, Police Chief Adrian Diaz, Amy Smith, CARE, the not law enforcement, public safety arm, the third public safety arm.
Correct.
3 department heads and then some guy sitting on a stage. Thank you. And
With a nice tie.
thank you. I try. And now to close us out, Sung Yang.
All right, folks, we are at the end. I want to thank Chris Supersonic Daniels, our panel members, speakers, and sponsors, but most of all, I especially want to thank all of you beautiful downtown boosters and civic leaders. The post-event reception has officially commenced. See you in the hall.